Today we're going to talk about the Baroque period. Looking from left to right, we see David by Bernini, Night Watch by Rembrandt, The Love Letter by Vermeer, and La Meninas by Velázquez. While these paintings and sculpture may look independent of each other, there is a common thread woven between each one: emotion. The Baroque period was intended to humanize art. Statues were no longer holier than thou, sitting on a pedestal looking down on you. Rather, they invaded your space and pulled you into the story. Paintings no longer depicted kings and queens or soldiers clad in their finest wear, but rather showed their lives behind closed doors. The point is that each piece strives to make you see the in-between rather than the beginning or the end. Another common element is superrealism. David, as you can see, looks like a human draped in marble. The painting's subjects are also realistic, as well as their backgrounds, and this was a common sign of the Baroque period, where equal attention was placed on. Now for the historical overview. The Baroque period took place from the 1600s to 1750. In between, a lot happened. If you history enthusiasts can remember, the 30 Years' War took place during this period. Initially a religious civil war, the 30 Years' War was waged between Protestants and Roman Catholics. The war soon developed into a devastating struggle for the balance of power in Europe. This event heavily influenced the artistic style of the time. The Catholic Church wanted more people to side with them in their beliefs, and so they tried to be more relatable to the society around them, and they found the ability to do so through art. Hence the humanization of many noble and revered people through the paintings and statues that were produced during this time. The Baroque style is characterized by exaggerated emotion and clear detail used to produce drama, exuberance, and grandeur in sculptures and paintings. Baroque iconography was direct, obvious, and dramatic, intending to appeal to all the senses. A common technique used during this period was chiaroscuro. This technique refers to the interplay between light and dark and is often used in paintings to produce 3D-like images. Another common technique was tenebrism, which describes a style of painting characterized by deep shadows and a distinct contrast between light and dark areas. While most believe that chiaroscuro and tenebrism to be the same, there is a very stark contrast between them, and it is that tenebrism was used for a dramatic illumination, which basically allowed the painters to spotlight a face, a figure, or a group of figures, while the contrasting dark areas of the painting are sometimes left totally black, and this basically dramatized the painting itself, while chiaroscuro involved using smaller amounts of shadow to increase three-dimensionality of a subject. Now let's talk about each individual artist. First up is Gian Lorenzo Bernini. These are just some pictures of him throughout his artistic career, from youngest to oldest. I will be discussing his sculpture of David, which is well known for its embodiment of everything the Baroque era eluded. The most expensive piece he sold was a sculpture of the Pope for $33 million, but taking into account that the other pieces he made couldn't be sold because they were priceless, so yeah. I'm assuming, as we attend a Catholic school, that all of you are aware of the story of David and Goliath, and Bernini wanted to depict this event, but in the middle. Weird, right? Why not just show David after he has beaten Goliath and he's victorious? But the reason Bernini did this is he wanted you to feel the emotion that David felt, not the conqueror's feeling, but the fear and anxiety as he went against a foe 10 times his size. Another aspect Bernini wanted to achieve was the invasion of space, so as to make you part of the story, and this is a perfect segue into the elements and principles of design. The motion of the piece and its rhythm is achieved through the use of contrapposto, which makes it look dynamic as opposed to static, and someone invades your space because it makes it seem as if he's ready to jump off the pillar. And for those of you who don't know what contrapposto is, it's the technique of making it seem like all the weight of the statue is placed on one foot. And so now take a look at the drapery that Bernini was able to achieve. This super realism-esque quality lends itself to creating texture within the piece and is a very Baroque thing to do, as during this period in time you had to focus as much as you did on the face onto the supporting components. Now it's time for the gossip. Before his marriage, Bernini had a passionate affair with a married woman, Costanza Bonarelli. Bernini ultimately fell for her after she posed as his model. It all came to a nasty end though when Bernini saw Costanza leaving the house of his brother Luigi one morning. The sculptor chased his brother with a crowbar, breaking bones before pursuing him with a sword. Though Luigi was spared after seeking refuge at a church, a servant of Bernini's was sent to Costanza's home where he slashed her with a razor. Bernini was fined, but ultimately forgiven by the Pope because he was said to be too important to the art world at the time. The two extra artworks that I'm showing you is Saint Helena, done by Andrea Bolchi, and Saint Andrew, done by Francois Duquesnoy. While both pieces do not utilize contrapposto like David, they do possess that super realism quality seen by the drapery and expression on the faces. They also have the emotion that David possessed and the intrusion of space type of quality. For example, take a look at Saint Helena from this angle. It is as if her hand is stretched out to you and somewhat begging for help. And so now we can move on to our next artist, Rembrandt Harmen Zoon van Rijn. These are just pictures of him throughout his artistic career from youngest to oldest. For him, I will be discussing the painting Night Watch, which is well known for its stark contrast to the other paintings of noble men. The most expensive piece he sold was called The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, which went for $50 million. Fun fact about that painting is that it was actually not one of his best, but since it went missing and was rediscovered in 1990, its value skyrocketed. But back to Night Watch. The painting can be boiled down to the classic painting of a leader and his crew, the leaders being Captain Franz Bennenkoch and Lieutenant Wilhelm von Rautenberg. Rembrandt ultimately tried to do the same thing that Bernini did, defy the rules. So instead of painting soldiers in a perfect line like this, he painted the soldiers as they naturally would be seen like this. Interesting fact about the painting is that Rembrandt used artistic license to put this little shimmering gold girl who was holding a chicken upside down. The ultimate purpose of that was to show the patriotism because the foot is an emblem for the musketeers. Pertaining to the elements of design though, we clearly see that chiaroscuro is used to create a contrast that draws your eyes to the subject. The chiaroscuro also aids in the form of the subject, allowing them to appear highly realistic. Also, color plays a large factor in this painting as it lends itself to you drawing your eyes to certain places as time goes by. For example, when you first view the painting, you just see the two leaders, but then suddenly you start to see the background and then you see that little girl nuzzled in there. No wonder Rembrandt was dubbed the master of colors. Lastly, we see movement as Rembrandt places these soldiers in positions that humanize them ultimately and make it seem as if like they are actually holding a spear or they're ready to shoot someone once they load up their musketeer. However, the contrast in form may not have been Rembrandt's intent, and we ultimately will never know. This painting isn't even called Night Watch, nor does it take place at night. The darkness you see is caused by centuries of dirt, and as for the name, Rembrandt never gave it one, hence it should be nameless, but due to the ripples it made in the artistic community, they were pressured to come up with a name and they landed on Night Watch. The most interesting fact about Rembrandt is that he ended up marrying his niece. No wonder his 3 children died at birth and his 4th one died a year after he was born. Other than that, Rembrandt didn't do anything too scandalous except paint a dead monkey in a portrait that he was commissioned to do for a very noble family. And the only reason he did it was because his monkey died and he ran out of canvases to paint on. And the 2 extra works that I'm showing you for Rembrandt is one by Michel Schwartz, which is Soldados Jungado a los Dados, and a work by Peter de Hooch, which is 2 soldiers and a serving woman with a trumpeter. Both pieces use chiaroscuro to highlight their subjects while not as masterfully as Rembrandt. They also have gone beyond the norm, just like Night Watch, as they show what happens beyond closed doors rather than depicting them as very statuesque people. Next is Johannes Vermeer. These are pictures of him throughout his artistic career from youngest to oldest, just like we did for the other artists. For him, I'll be discussing the painting The Love Letter, which is well known for its intimacy that it alludes. The most expensive piece Vermeer has ever sold was called The Concert, and it actually went for $200 million, which was the 3rd most expensive painting that was sold in the world. Looking back at The Love Letter, though, the painting is ultimately trying to make you feel like you're trespassing, and while it does sound odd, that's its main goal. So if you turn your gaze away from the mistress and her maid, look at the surrounding, like the forefront. You see that the curtain is pulled back and the positions of the subjects are very personal to one another. It makes it seem like you're an intruder, and that's ultimately what Vermeer wanted to do. But there are other conspiracy theories for what his intentions for the painting were. And the most believed one is that the maid is the ultimate ruler and the controller of the mistress herself. And this is just evident through, if you're looking at the maid and the way she's standing over the mistress and her gaze and the way her arm is shaped, like the fact that her arm is straight down on the left almost symbolizes like she's a painter and she paints the mistress' existence. And her paintbrush though is the broom. And if you see that dark stripe running along the left side of the maid's dress, you see that it actually stops right before it hits the basket handle, but then inside the basket handle it's one dark circle and then it doesn't continue on. And that sort of symbolizes a third eye. And it does sound crazy, but it symbolizes a third eye, which meant that the maid was all-knowing and knew everything that would happen to the mistress. And moving on from that though, when we look at the elements of design, contrast is definitely a big one, because the darkened forefront aids in creating that sense of intrusion, and it ultimately makes the piece itself. And you also have that space along with the use of lines that shows the depth of the room, which again reinforces the idea of intrusion, as it seems like the subjects just try to get as far as they could within this house so they could have this private conversation. As for the gossip on Vermeer, there literally is none, because he was a very quiet and introspective person, and it actually took hundreds of years after his death till he got recognized for his amazing work. The two extra art pieces I decided to put in with Vermeer is Aristotle with a bust of Homer by Rembrandt and St. Matthew and the Angel by Guido Reni. Both paintings strive to do what the love letter did, which was to create such a personal piece that you somehow felt guilty to steal a quick glance, and they did so through adroitly utilizing the shadows to create a sense of intimacy. Lastly is Diego Velázquez. These are pictures of him throughout his artistic career from youngest to oldest. For him, I'll be discussing the painting La Meninas, which is known as the most perfect painting in history. As for the most expensive piece Velázquez sold, there really isn't any. They usually go for $3, maybe $6 million, and those are like his portraits. However, La Meninas, along with other paintings, are priceless treasures. Observing La Meninas, it would be weird if you weren't confused. We have the little Spanish princess getting dressed by her servants and preparing for court. Velázquez is on the left and on him is keys to the court to show his status, because he was always boasting about his status within the community. Then if you direct your eyes to the background, this is where the confusion starts, because you see two people in either a painting or a mirror. Those are the princess's parents, but where they are specifically has confused many viewers for centuries now. Because either we are her parents and Velázquez is painting the parents, or our eyes are the mirrors that Velázquez is using to paint the little princess and her servants. And there is no concrete answer, and you really can go back and forth forever, but ultimately it's this mystery accompanied with the realism that has made La Meninas the greatest painting in history. As for elements of design, tenebrism is used to create these very dark spots that fundamentally draws your eye to the painting and sparks the curiosity of the subject, as the only thing highlighted on the wall is that painting or the mirror of the princess's parents. Shadows are also utilized to add the needed texture and realism to the princess fabric to make it seem like actually a Baroque period painting. In addition to that, value is important in creating a mystery in this painting as well, because the lightness and slight tinge of white in the parents' photo or mirror, whatever it is, makes you think as if it is like maybe a reflection, and it's that uncertainty that causes you to keep thinking back and forth. As for the gossip, Velázquez really never cared about art, and I think that's a shocking thing to hear about an artist. His main interest was with his status in the community, and the way he sought to increase it was through painting. Even though he loathed it, he just started doing it and getting better at it, and suddenly he's like the best painter ever. And the two extra works that I'm showing is the Anatomy Lesson of Dr. Nicolas Tulp by Rembrandt and Supper at Emmaus by Caravaggio. While they do not live up to La Meninas, they possess the feeling that we are viewing something behind closed doors. And if you look at the Supper at Emmaus, actually, there is that sort of mystery, because the main subject is extending his hand and it goes past the character who's in the forefront. And to summarize this entire video, David, The Night Watch, The Love Letter, and La Meninas were revolutions during the artistic period. They sought to break down preconceived societal norms brought by the Renaissance and created an era of humanization that will continue to be a core element in many artworks today. So, thank you for watching.